And we're off. So this morning, a lot of these workshops, it is about how do we grow our businesses, and a lot of the times as leaders, the work we do as leaders is instrumental in helping us grow our businesses. And this topic is one that's been really useful for me over the years, and in particular one that I found useful since I kind of have more consciously applied it to my business and business relationships. And it's all about how we agree standards and boundaries, but then also think about business values and where that plays a role in the work we do with our team. So we'll talk about that this morning. And as usual, this morning's session is to give you some thinking space, because very often in our businesses, in our roles, we spend a lot of time doing stuff, running through activities. And actually, where the really quality moments happen is when we slow down the pace a bit and take some time to really think about what we're doing, think about the people that we're leading, and think about the work that we then start to do differently to be more effective as leaders in our businesses. And sometimes it might be relationships that you're working on, it might be people that you're interacting with, it might be customers, clients, patients, but to really think about more deliberately what we're doing. So that's the idea of this morning's session, just to kind of slow things down, get you off the treadmill, give you a chance to think more strategically about what you're doing. Andrew joined us as well. Just let Andrew in. Good morning, Andrew, and good morning, Joe. Joe, nice to see you.
Hi.
So we talk about standards and boundaries, and we'll talk about why it's important. We'll talk about a principle that is from executive coaching. That is a principle that's called contracting. So we'll talk about that this morning, because that will really help. And we'll talk about the idea of team contracting as well. You can do it at an individual level, but you can also do contracting at a team level. So we'll talk about those two principles. And then I'll give you a chance to talk about that with each other to see what you think might be useful to take away. And something that I found astonishing myself, and had experienced this the first leadership role I was in, was that when you look at the evidence, 61% of people promoted to management roles receive no training after promotion. So they get promoted, and they get promoted for the right reasons. They get promoted because they're really good at what they do. When you're a good operator, you're really good at your functional role, whatever that may be, you tend to be someone that can be trusted, you tend to be someone that can get stuff done. And then when a leadership position comes up, you're kind of a natural fit for it. But sometimes that transition is difficult, because what it takes to be a high performer is different from what it takes to be a high-performing leader, right? You don't find that out until you go into the management position or the leadership position, as I've found out myself. And then the other thing that's interesting is even after promotion, so those people who do receive some form of leadership development, they don't have ongoing management training or leadership development. So you kind of get an idea of what to do, but then you don't have that ongoing support, and that creates a gap for people. So I share those with you because they're just really interesting. They explain a lot around why a lot of organizations struggle with that leadership gap, the gap of leading teams, for people feeling micromanaged, and sometimes leaders not quite knowing how to handle difficult situations. And also something I talk about when I run programs, and I thought it might be useful just to touch on this today, especially when it comes to contracting and these standards and boundaries. Very often when we think about what it takes to perform at the next level, and I'm thinking about our teams now, because as leaders of businesses or people in the roles you're in, you'll already be performing at a high level. But when we break it down, there are three things that have to be in place. The first thing is the right psychology. So people have to have the right mindset. You remember a couple of sessions ago, we talked about growth mindset, right? Focusing on possibility and not kind of barriers or challenges. Thinking about opportunity, managing yourself, bringing the right attitude to different situations. And for some people, they don't even realize that their psychology is not optimal. So they start to focus on problems. They might have almost like a negative outlook. They're constantly kind of bringing people down. They don't even realize it's happening. You can't achieve a level of high performance without the right attitude, right? So psychology and attitude is first. Then we think about skills and what it takes to be good at your role. And as high performers, you'll find you do those things naturally, but a lot of the teams that you work with perhaps just aren't quite hitting the mark when it comes to skills and actually delivering in the role. And then the final thing is about systems. It's about giving people structure so they can deliver time and time again and do the right things over and over, so they don't keep slipping back into bad habits. And when you get these three things right, you hit the next level of performance. And you will all be doing this with probably not even realizing it. You just do it. But when we think about what it takes to lead high-performing teams, we have to get these three things in place, because it starts to give people the right framework and structure to hit that next level of performance. So I'm interested to share with you some of the challenges that we see from the clients that we work with, and I kind of share these because this is something that I've kind of talked about specifically. I had and it always brings me back to a couple of clients, but one in particular that I work with, where, you know, when she and I started to work together, her background was that she'd been a scientist, quite successful, you know, quite bright, worked in a laboratory, had the right attitude, and then was naturally kind of quite good with people as well. So she ended up in a sales role. And in this organization she was running, she then quickly became a sales manager. And then she was working for the managing director. It's about 20 people in the business, so not a huge business, about 20. And shortly after, she'd been a sales manager for about a year, 18 months, and then the MD retired, and he recommended her for managing director. So she became managing director, and I was working with her as MD, and she still hadn't replaced herself. So she was managing an organization of about 20 people, including the sales team. And this is what she was seeing. When I said to her, you know, why am I here? why are we having this conversation? These are the things she said. Well, I've got a problem with attitude of the team. There's all sorts of stuff goes on. You know, people gossip, they talk about each other. There's a real challenge with culture. She said that there's not everybody, but a number of people just demonstrate low enthusiasm. There's this just kind of apathy around the workplace, and it affects me and my mood. There's this whole piece around not accepting responsibility. People are passing things off to each other, and it's affecting customers. There are things she wanted to change in the business, but every time she tried to put something in place, people resisted it. And then she found that people were actually looking for and creating problems, not looking for solutions. And there was a kind of reaction to everything that was going on. So we started this conversation about, okay, what does she want to do? And it was actually affecting her. She had a young family. She ended up spending more time at work. The previous MD, he was kind of had been a bit of a mentor for her, but his advice was just work really hard and it'll be okay. And it sounds like good advice on the surface, but that on its own is not enough. So you might be fine. You might kind of resonate with some of these leadership challenges. Certainly, I have done. And I'll finish the story about what we did together at the end of today's session. So she was in this situation. One of the other things she found kept coming up was she had a couple of people in her team where their performance and behaviours weren't right, and every time she tried to address it, not only did she get resistance, but it kind of seemed to make the situation worse. So I'll talk to you after we've done your breakouts. I'll tell you what she did. But effectively, you know, as leaders, sometimes we have to examine what we put up with. What do we tolerate? Because what we put up with, we end up with, right? And what we allow to happen will continue. And so we really have to think about that. And I think about that in my early leadership roles, where perhaps you have pushback from your teams, and you think, how on earth do I handle that, right? And if we allow that to continue, we can find ourselves kind of being the one that can never get change embedded in our organizations. So I want to introduce you to this principle. And there's the book, you're all familiar. Did I tell anybody? Did I tell you I wrote a book? Can't remember whether I mentioned it. I think I might have mentioned it. So I wrote this book, Coaching Leaders. And I think some of you have actually got a copy, haven't you? Michelle, I think you've got a copy, haven't you?
I have indeed. It is packed in my suitcase, awaiting my forthcoming trip to Tenerife.
Oh, lovely.
So you will be poolside with me.
I'll tell you what, if you want the audiobook version, I'll come and read it to you. I'll do that for a week in Tenerife. So good. I look forward to hearing your feedback on it, Michelle. So the Coaching Leaders book really does lay out a framework for leadership, and I get lots of messages from people who have read the book, and of course a lot of clients read the book. But it runs through this framework, and we're not going to talk about all of this framework today. The one we're going to talk about is contracting, and this is a model that really does help you to think about how you structure your approach to leading your teams. And the first step is having a plan, right? We've talked about planning in these sessions before. Then we talk about relationships, and then we think about contracting. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about contract. Then I'm going to invite you to just kind of think about what this means for you. And I've used contracting in a number of different ways. So one is leading teams. So putting a contract in place with the team or individual team member. I've used it with clients and customers. I've used it with partners or stakeholders that I'm collaborating with. And what contracting is, it's not a formal contract, by the way. You can make it formal, but it's not a formal contract. What it is, in fact, is a strategic conversation. So it's a strategic conversation that allows you and the other person to set and agree expectations of the relationship and how you're going to work together. It allows you to talk about standards. Today we're talking about standards, boundaries, that kind of thing. And of course, boundaries. What will you and won't you do and accept from each other? It allows you to start to become clear about future performance. What will you commit to in the relationship together going forwards? So what will you commit to as a leader to your individual team member? What are your expectations about their commitment to you as well around future performance? And it allows you to make a commitment to address issues if they come up. So it's a bit like, that they say, tell people what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you want to tell them, then tell them what you told them, right? It's a bit like that contracting. You're signposting to people that you're going to do something in the relationship in the future. And because you contract and say, I'm going to do this if it happens, you're much more committed to doing it, and the other person's not surprised when you do it. So if you start to see performance problems, there's no surprises when you say to the team member, I need to have a performance-related conversation with you, because you've already told them you're going to do that if you notice those problems. And it's the same with customers. If you're managing larger customers where you want to start to have those kind of more difficult conversations with a larger customer, then actually this gives you the mechanism and the process to be able to do it. And then really, anything that comes up, you create the opportunity to handle them so that you're confident, they're confident. And really by contracting, what I've found is that you create this anchor point in your relationships. It's an anchor point from which you can return to time and time again for all sorts of things. But generally speaking, performance, behavior, and attitudinal issues that you might encounter with your teams. And what I recommend as you think about, an example. So what we do on our courses, we kind of get people really thinking about, okay, if you're going to have a contracting conversation, think about the individual, think about the specific behaviors, attitudes, and performance you're seeing today and in the past, and what are some of the things you want to be able to address going forward more confidently. Okay, and so here's an example of the kind of notes that one of our clients might use. So the first thing is to sit down and have a conversation with someone, saying, right, from here on in, I'm going to start to use a coaching style when we're in conversation. Okay, what that means is you'll get less answers from me and probably more questions. And there might be times when you think, I know Justin knows this, why is he coaching me, right? But actually it's about helping and supporting you to improve your responsibility and start to think differently. And coaching helps us to do that. So we're going to start to create some space. This reduces the reliance on you as a leader. And that's why it's important, because it helps you to free up some time. And in customer conversations, you might have similar contracting discussions. You might talk about being open, honest, and receptive. Okay, so both ways, that's a two-way street. You want honesty, you want openness, and you want someone to be receptive to feedback. You want to see and you want to agree positive behaviors and attitudes, right? You want people to kind of, where possible, start to see the positives in different situations, start to demonstrate more positive attitudes, actions, and behaviors. Be supportive of each other as a team, including you as the leader, right? Because it's really important that you get that support, especially if you're giving someone support. It's pretty fair to ask for that in return. And then to be challenged and to challenge each other. So to be open to challenge, right? So challenging perspectives, challenging ideas, perhaps challenging what's going on today. And of course, this one's really important. So whenever I've contracted, and I haven't done it as deliberately in the past as I do now, but one of the things I've talked about is actually, when you have a difficult conversation as a leader, it's not an easy thing to do. Those of you who are in leadership positions will know, even though you have to do that, you have to have that difficult conversation. It's not an easy thing to do. There aren't many people that enjoy doing it. But one of the things I've found is really effective is to say to your team, my commitment to you is that even though having a difficult conversation in the future is going to be tough for me as well, my commitment to you and the business is that I'll do it. And it's a really powerful strategic, contract to have with somebody, that you'll do something that you find difficult and is going to be difficult for them, but because of the relationship, you'll do it anyway. And at the end of that, what you're looking for is for you both to have the opportunity to move forward positively. So not hold grudges, move forward positively, and that can be it can be a real shift and transform relationships. And then finally, to welcome feedback as an opportunity for growth. So when you have that difficult conversation, you're giving people feedback, how do they see it? They don't see it as criticism, they see it as an opportunity for growth. And that really does shift people's thinking. Okay, so that's contracting. So this is significant in terms of how this changes the dynamic of your working relationships. If you can get this right, start to put a frame around a contract, and think about this in terms of how do we set standards, how do we use it to set boundaries, how do we use it to start to talk about values, things that are the right sorts of behaviors. Okay, so I'm going to give you the chance to talk about what you've heard so far this morning. You may be doing some of this already, you may not. Right, so it could be an opportunity to introduce it, might be an opportunity to improve it if you've done something like this in the past. But I'll just open up a couple of breakout rooms, and I'll give you, we say it's just not long enough. So I'm going to give you 15 minutes this morning to have a chat with each other and talk about what does this mean for you, particularly through this lens of kind of contracting. So I'll do a couple of breakout rooms. So there'll be 1, 3, 1, 4. I hope you enjoy the conversation. I'm going to call you back in 15. We'll come back at 22. And as you know, Zoom breakout rooms are ruthless. Once I press that button, you get a minute and then you're back, whether you want to be or not. So hopefully you won't be cut off in mid-conversation. But if I can just invite you in your two groups, if somebody can just take a few notes, and when we come back, just be prepared to share the kind of key themes of the discussion this morning, because there's real value in each group hearing, the summary and what it is that you're going to take away. Okay, is that all right? Perfect. Okay, well, you're great. It's a great bunch on this call this morning, so I know you're going to enjoy the conversation. Have a great conversation. I'll see you back here in 15 minutes. Resume our conversation. So thanks for joining the breakout rooms. I hope these conversations were valuable. Let's kind of get some feedback, if that's all right. So we'll kind of do it in order. Room 1 was Christina, Joe, and Mike. Who took notes?
I took some notes, if anybody else doesn't mind.
Go for it, Joe.
Go ahead.
Joe, thanks.
Christina started off and she was saying that her experience, she's quite experienced in this, it turns out. And
Good.
said it's a good idea to develop new leaders from within. It may take longer, but it's worthwhile for team dynamics perspective and also for the growth of the company. Basically, my similar experience was my practice brought in somebody from outside without even asking us team members if we wanted to apply for the position, and there was utter outrage, upset. Everybody felt, completely, we're just not at all impressed in any way. And with with Christina's experience, the incomer didn't really understand how the business worked. It wasn't a traditional sales role model. It was more scientific based. Whereas, which I think, to me, it seemed that it was more about the company values and that kind of embedding that in the sales process. And eventually that person left. And with Christina's experience as well, she was developing through the team in a coaching style, like you were saying. So I think she's the perfect example of, you know, everything that you're proclaiming.
Well done, Christina.
She had regular team meetings. Once 1 week will be one-to-ones, and then the alternate week will be team meetings. So she sees all of her team members at least once a week.
Yeah.
You know, and checks in with them. And somebody said, oh, they didn't feel particularly guided through the coaching style, so she's tailored it slightly a bit more, you know, just to kind of, you know, so it seems to me she's really in tune with her team, and she's looking at the overall picture, what benefits the whole company as well as the individual members of the team. So I think she's a great leader. So nice to meet you, Christina. Well done. I keep up the good work.
Oh, that's so sweet, Jo.
Mike had a slightly different experience. He used to be a mechanical engineer and was quickly promoted as team leader not long after qualifying. And he felt high pressure, didn't feel well led or guided. And eventually he was so stressed out, it made him ill and he had to leave the company. And so I think that's a shame for him to have to go through all of that. But actually, it's also a real big loss to the company. They've lost such a wonderful team member because he didn't feel supported or didn't feel that there was a safe space to discuss these issues, you know. So obviously what we're talking about here is to have that conversation at the outset, so then when problems do arise, then you don't need to lose that staff member. And for me personally, I've got no experience really in this, other than, you know, when they brought somebody in over us and everyone was outraged. But I'm currently hiring, I don't know if you hire volunteers, recruiting volunteers for my social enterprise. And so I just want to make sure that their journey is what they want, you know, so that you know, they stay and get involved in, you know, as long as possible. So that's why I thought it'd be helpful for me to come on today, you know, to talk about what sort of things do I need to make clear with them from the start, now that they're coming on, just so hopefully to make everything, you know, as good as it can be. So thank you, Justin.
Very good, Jo. Thank you. Thank you. Really, really good kind of summary of your discussions. I wasn't there, but it sounds like a good summary of your discussions. Christina, Mike, anything that you would add?
No, just to say that Jo did a fantastic job on that summary.
Yeah. I'd like to point out that my line manager is Tim Reed. I don't know if you know him, Justin.
Yes.
So he's been mentoring me a lot on how to do this, and he pointed me in your direction. So that's why I'm here.
Ah, brilliant. Thank you, Christina. That's great news. Yeah, thank you. I do know Tim. That's good.
Yeah.
Can I just say one more thing, actually?
Yeah, sure.
You might have noticed that Mike's got a microphone in his he's got a podcast. 80th episode has just been released, apparently. And if you want to search it up, it's called, I think, Growing a Dental Practice. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Well done. And if you look through the back episodes, you might find I was on one of them.
Yeah, that's actually, that's how Justin and I met. I was like, can you be on my podcast?
Brilliant. Right, well, we'll definitely search up that one then.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Thank you, Jo. Thanks for the plug as well. That's great. So room 2 was Andrew, Michelle and Leanne. How did you guys get on?
Very well. I took some notes, just being me. So the kind of the critical points, the feedbacks we kind of got to was, it was about the setting of the rules of play is critically important in terms of contract.
Yep.
And then actualizing buy-in from all parties is critical, and also the most difficult point, because we've all experienced kind of, I'm going to say, long in the tooth organizations and people that have been in companies for decades and are very, very resistive to change. So we find the challenge being getting contracts in place with people that don't want to be on contracts very difficult.
Yes.
We had a long discussion about disc profiling. and some of our personality types and some of the struggles we have when dealing with people in the verticality of an organization, whereas you generally find different types of disc personalities higher in the organization, and we as the three of us all struggle with that vertical because we are very, very similar type personalities, and you've known me for years, so I'm sure you can imagine.
Yes. Yes.
The feedback on what we'll tolerate is very important. We've all had positions or moved from companies because it was just not working for us. Yeah, and then the last point was, again, we fed back towards the contract idea and how to deal with the people who feel within the organization that it's forced upon them. They don't want to pay, they don't want to engage.
Yeah.
And then more generally, the generalized anti-change people. And the death, we've talked before, the death of any organization and the people that say we've always done it like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's good. And you're absolutely right, Andrew. I'm glad that you raised those topics, because contracting is one part of it, but getting kind of agreement and enrollment on the contract is something else. And it's easier with some people than others. And it's why, you know, Christina's point through Joe was around that coaching style. That if you look at the research around coaching, you know, when you're leading teams and coaching them, the whole idea of coaching is that you're joining up the employee and individual's personal goals with the organization's goals and the performance goals that you're looking to achieve. And it doesn't, you know, the thing is, it doesn't happen in a single conversation, especially with those people that are a bit more resistant or longer in the tooth. And you'll find yourselves having to revisit this, you know, over and over with certain members of the team. And I often think of it, you know, and whilst it sounds like it's a strange relationship to draw, I think about it as it's a bit like raising kids. You know, sometimes with children, they need to hear the boundaries over and over and over and over before they go, right, okay, I can't get away with that. Yeah. And it's the same with some team members. They have perhaps they just haven't got the level of maturity they need, and we need to just keep reinforcing the boundaries, reinforcing the contract, you know, almost having that ongoing conversation with them until at the point they go, actually, this isn't going away. Sometimes it's a battle of wills. You know, it's about, you know, is my will to have this relationship work stronger than your will to undermine it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very familiar.
That's exactly what I've been dealing with in the main of this week. Justin, the subject of today's webinar could not be more timely.
Good.
I would just say that the slide that you put up, you know, what are we willing to tolerate? What you put up with, you end up with. I was like, oh my God, that is just is exactly resonating with where I'm at the minute. So, yeah, I'm not willing to end up with what the current situation is. So that's things need to change. So it's been really interesting hearing about the contracting, and we'll come to see whether it helps in those conversations and moves things along. I really hope it does.
Yeah, me too. Good luck with it, Michelle. Good luck. And that reminder that it probably isn't a one-time thing. You know? No,
you know what also just struck home with me was what you just said about maybe some people just have, you know, they need reminded over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah. And what surprises me is, because you think that is maturity and you find yourself stepping into parent mode more often than you would care to. It doesn't necessarily come with age.
No, absolutely not. You know, to a certain degree, Michelle, we're all kids running around in adults' bodies.
Yeah, I think this has been a massive realization for me.
Yeah. Sometimes that's a good thing, right? Because when you have fun, you want to just kind of let your hair down. It's brilliant. But when you're in a professional work environment, it's not so good. When the child's running around the office or with customers or whatever, it does take. And it's interesting. I don't know if you've read any transactional analysis. But effectively, I don't want to go off tangent, but effectively, we have to be careful in work relationships that we don't end up parent and child.
Yep.
Yeah. We have to bring the other person up to adult.
Yep.
Really, really important distinction. I remember when I first learned about that, I was like, God, yeah, I've definitely been guilty of parent-child
Yeah.
stuff. When you do parent-child, that person becomes dependent on you.
Yeah.
Start behaving like a child. So you have to really kind of, coaching helps you bring that kind of adult to adult relationship. And so
Yeah.
does contracting. You can put that in the contract.
I mean, I think you should
That's
probably
what we're working on.
do one of these sessions on installing accountability into adult. How do you actually make somebody who's not accountable, doesn't understand accountability, be accountable and actually live with it? Because it's horrendous.
It's not easy. It's not easy. Wow. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Michelle. Really, really good feedback. So I'm conscious we are kind of up against the clock. So a couple of things I wouldn't mind just sharing with you before we close today. First thing was to finish off the story. So the lady I was talking about, the client that I work with, one of the things that she and I did was we started out one-to-one coaching, and actually she ended up going on the joint program. And what she found was that she started to address some of these issues, but they just kept, like we've talked about, they just kept recurring. And one of the conversations that she and I had over time was, you know, if we don't keep reinforcing this, if your will isn't stronger, if you're not continually having these coaching conversations, setting boundaries, people's behavior drifts. It's really interesting to see. And one of the things that we won't get time to talk about today, perhaps I'll pick it up in a future session, is she designed a team contract. So she was able to have one-to-one contracting conversations and team contracting conversations. What happens then is you find your team start to help you to manage some of those poor behaviors that you're seeing across a wider team. So that can be really valuable. But over a period of time, she was able to kind of get a better outcome from her teams, but she still had to course correct. And even today, you know, she and I have a conversation once a month. I'm seeing her in 2 weeks' time, and she still has to have these conversations with me. You know, it's 2 years in, right? So these things don't go away. Your resolve strengthens as a leader to be able to handle these situations. And I think that's an important distinction, because if we think we're going to fix it and then it doesn't get fixed, we can feel like a failure. And actually, you're not the failure. It's part of the process. There's a couple other things that I've just realized I'm not sharing my screen. Let me quickly share. Not that. Hold on. And that one. Let me share that. So, a couple of things. One is, I love this quote because I had a manager, the last manager I had in my big corporate role, his nickname was the Hammer. And his nickname was the Hammer because he had one leadership style, and it was hammering people. And he was just an awful person to work for. But it reminded me of this quote: if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So we've got to start to change our leadership approach, right? We've got to find a different way to manage people and coach people, so that we're not just kind of doing one size fits all. And the other thing that I've discovered through my own personal experience, and some of you might have heard me say this before, but think about this for yourself. In order to be successful as leaders, we need people that we can have confidential conversations with, right? It's really important for our own sanity. We need a community of people that are going through the same things as us, so that we can learn from them, share ideas, share best practice, and have that kind of place to go to for support. We need to collaborate with people so that we can start to understand, you know, what works, what doesn't work, and start to gain some of that insight from people with more experience than us. And we need to have our ideas challenged so that we start to think differently. And then finally, we need to not just know this stuff, we need to do it. So we need a commitment to act. And they're the 5 things. It's taken me, I'm perhaps not as sharp as I should be, because it's taken me quite a few years to discover those 5 things. But I would encourage you to have to think about your own leadership development. Think about these 5 things. How can you get these 5 things in place for yourself? They make such a difference when they're all in place. And any one of them missing just leaves you a little bit disconnected. Final thing then is, if anybody would like to grab a 45-minute strategy session with me, just a call to talk about what's going on for you, just let me put that on the screen again. You are very welcome to do so. I'm just going to put the link in the chat. So if you like a 45-minute one-to-one person coaching for you, So, you know, you're coaching your teams, and kind of the question I always ask is, who's coaching me? I'm fortunate I do work with a coach, so I get that. I get interaction at least weekly, so that's good. But if you don't have someone doing that for you, you fancy a whistle stop. Andrew did it recently, so thanks, Andrew, for that. Hopefully it was useful. And if anybody would like to do that, then feel free to use that link. Gets you straight into my diary, and whatever it is you'd like coaching on, we can have that session. Okay. We are at 3 minutes to the hour. I'm going to let you go and get prepped for your 10 o'clocks. Thank you so much, everyone, for the engagement today. Thanks for joining us. And we'll be here same time next week. So we're going to do these on a Friday, where probably 9 out of 10 Fridays we'll be here on a Friday at 9 o'clock. So you are very welcome to join us. All right.
Great.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Justin.
Justin.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Have a
Have a good
fun-
Bye,
weekend.
everybody. Bye.
Great
Take care.
weekend.
Thanks again.
Justin, thanks again for your email help. Much appreciated. You're an absolute hero.